I taught my bird to whistle like a referee. I can make a free throw when I'm down on one knee. I've been a fan of basketball since I was 5. Now I am a fan of HoopSpeak Live. Hilarious analysis, a mystifying trope. An angel with a cudgel breaking bubbles of soap. Like honeybees buzzing around a hive. Yeah, everybody buzzing about HoopSpeak Live.
Hey, welcome to HoopSpeak Live. I'm Beckley Mason, and with me today, no Zach Harper, no Ethan Sherwood Strauss, but special guest host, the Peeper himself, James Herbert. Welcome, James. It's about time.
Thank you, Beckley. This is a new thing for me.
All right, well, I'm going to turn the tables on you. You're actually going to be more guest than host for this. You've been working with SB Nation, and before that, Harvard Paroxysm, churning out some great profiles and interview pieces. And I want to know, who has been the most interesting player to talk to, not necessarily for their personality or for the stature of them as a player, but just like as a dude, whether he be weird or for what other reason. Who have you liked talking to?
Larry Sanders has easily been my favorite to talk to. I mean, just as a dude, there are only two of them where I finished talking to the guy and I just said, okay, I don't need to write a profile. I'm just gonna put this Q&A straight out there, and that was the JJ Redick one and the Larry Sanders one. Sanders is just a really interesting, smart guy. Like, even if you ask him a question that seems kind of boring and plain, he'll take his time and be really thoughtful and give you something like detailed and actually about basketball. There was one question in my Q&A where it was about how he dealt with not playing as much when he was in his first couple of years. And he started off giving the like kind of standard athlete speak of like, just got to go to the gym, got to keep putting the work in. And then he just looks at me and he says, "Don't let discouragement find a home." And I'm just like, whoa, that is a really good line. He's a really thoughtful, interesting guy, and not just about basketball. He'll give you basketball thoughts, but then he's also like really into art and music and things like that, which we didn't go into like great detail with in my conversation because it was mostly about basketball. But at the end, I did tack on a couple of questions about that with him, just because I wanted to hear him talk about non-basketball, because I think that's where he's most comfortable anyway.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, and there's something else I wanted to ask you about is when you're doing these interviews, and like Larry Sanders has a tendency to be all over the place on the court and not look like the most thoughtful fellow. How do you square that? And there's a school of thought that the way someone plays is often a style that portends more about who they are as a person, and kind of you can access the person through their style of play. When you've been doing these interviews, what do you think about that idea?
Yeah, I don't think it's a straight one-to-one relationship. Like, if they're wild on the court, they have to be wild in real life, or if they're selfish on the court, they're definitely a selfish person, or even the inverse. I don't think that every pass-first point guard that really shares the ball is going to be an awesome human being either. And the thing about Larry that I think you can tell when he plays, you can tell he plays with a lot of emotion, he plays with a lot of spirit, a lot of passion, and that's just how he is as a person. I think you can get that. But when you see him explode and get a technical or something like that, I don't think that means he's a wild card off the court, because he's really not. He was the most chill of anyone that I talked to. But the passion is there, and I think that is him, like on and off. That's how he plays. And I asked Boylan about that. I'm not the only one that asked him about that. He spoke about it in other interviews too, about the technicals and just how he deals with them. And he says with Larry, he is a really emotional guy on the court, and what they're trying to do with him is they're trying to teach him to only channel that in a positive way. So the energy's awesome, but when he gets frustrated, if he gets down on himself or he gets frustrated with officials and it comes out that way, then that's obviously not what they want. And he's had a few technicals recently. I don't think he's had any in the past couple weeks though. They're working with him there. But I do think, yeah, like there's sometimes a link. There sometimes isn't. The one thing that Larry really wants people to know about him, though, is that he's not a hothead or anything even close to it. And if you talk to him for just 30 seconds, you'll get that.
Yeah, I thought one of the interesting parts of that particular interview was when he was talking about his personal appearance. You know, I mean, he's 7 feet tall, black in Milwaukee. It's not
Yeah.
exactly like he said that, he gets that people can feel threatened about him, and you can tell that there's some sort of, I think there's a lot to be said about the way that you look, shapes the way that people respond to you, and that shapes the way that you think about yourself, and then that you put stuff out. And for a guy like that, it must be, who's that, reflective on who he is and his relationships, must be frustrating to know that what 17,000 people in the arena, and then, hundreds of thousands more see, is not reflective of who he thinks he is.
Yeah, the cool thing about it is he's not like mad about it. He's not bitter. He's not like, how dare they see me? That he was the thing he kept repeating is, I think it's funny. I think it's funny that people see me that way when it's not true. I would compare it to in the Raptors locker room.
A lot of times
Sorry.
people say something is funny when what they're really saying is, it pisses me off.
Well, he's not a fan of it, but what I'm saying is he didn't come off like he was super upset at the perception. He was kind of just like, if only people like really knew who I was. I think I actually brought this up with him, and the nicest guy, not like the Raptors locker room is pretty much full of nice guys, but I would say the nicest guy, the guy who um, nobody in the media has a single in the Toronto media has a single problem with is Amir Johnson, and he is tatted up unlike anybody else that's ever been on the Raptors. When he arrived on the team, I'm not sure everybody expected him to be the way he is, but he is again. He's very similar to Larry. He's all about kind of fashion. He's all about like being involved in the Toronto community and doing all these crazy, wacky Amir Johnson things. Like he was playing ping pong with fans a couple of weekends ago. He went and dressed like a zombie a few months ago. He did shave a Raptors claw into his head. He's just this like wacky dude, and even though if you saw him on the street and didn't know it, you could get the wrong idea because he's this huge dude covered in tattoos, just like Larry Sanders. But both of them, I think it's kind of impressive that both of them don't walk around with a chip on their shoulder because of it at all.
Yeah, Amir, my favorite Amir moment is that picture that I saw because you retweeted, of him putting the star on his tree, like 20 feet up in his very high ceilinged house. Like, could have fallen to his death, could have not. You never know. Like, luckily, he's fine. Toronto has been like a very interestingly bad team, which is rare. Most bad teams are boring. Toronto, has somehow had like this little point guard thing. They have the, Terrence Ross highlights kind of have been a fun thing. DeMar DeRozan playing well. Bargnani, the shame of Bargnani. Are people into the Raptors, or are these just storylines that trickle out of Toronto?
If you're around the team and if you're into basketball, there's not been a single dull moment this season. There's all from the start of the season, everybody was excited about Jonas Valanciunas. Everybody was kind of optimistic about the team. People were going in thinking that Bargnani was going to carry over what he did last year and that they suddenly had this starting five that made sense and Kyle Lowry was going to be an all-star and all of this stuff. And that was pretty quickly derailed. But even once that derailed, it was the bad stuff was interesting. Like the fact that it seemed like the lowest moment that this franchise had in a history full of low moments. There was people reporting on these meetings with ownership about the GM and about the coach and wondering if one of them or both of them had to go or what was going to go on. And there's been this recent resurgence, and Terrence Ross has been exciting when they sort of brought him along slowly at the beginning. The storylines have changed, but it's remained interesting to basketball people. Mm-hmm. Now, the question that you asked was a little bit different. It was, are people into it? And I'm not quite sure how to answer that because if you watch the sports news or whatever in Toronto right now, pretty much just talking about the lockout ending in the NHL. That's what it's always kind of been
No
is
Argonauts?
a hockey town first, and that's that. What?
No Argonauts news?
Not currently. People do care about the Argos though, but no, I mean the Raptors are in the news now, but I would say that people are definitely more talking about the Leafs right now. Sadly to me anyway.
Yeah, it's as interesting as being bad is. A boring winning team will always be a much bigger draw. All right, let's bring on our guest today from the New York Times, but also let's just call him TV's Howard Beck, recovering from an ACL surgery like his main man Shump Shump. How are you doing? Oh, I like the crutches in the background there.
That was unintentional. This is just simply the spot that I've been planted in semi-permanently for the last 7 days on this couch here.
Nice.
Uh,
So explain your rehab, how it's going.
uh,
Are you ahead of schedule yet? Can we say that Howard Beck is ahead of schedule?
I've been advised not to release any information in keeping with the tradition of New York NBA teams. We're going to obfuscate as much as possible. In fact, I'm not even going to acknowledge that I had knee surgery. I'm just going to say it's really sore, which is accurate. And then weeks from now, I'll let on that, in fact, I had my entire lower torso and legs replaced with bionics.
Can't tell if it's the drugs or Howard just can't hear us. Well, I don't know.
I'm gonna get him to.
Might be a losing battle, which is too bad because we had much to talk about with Howard, including what kind of drugs are you taking? Do they work? In what ways do they work? What sort of visions are you having?
I think we have to move on.
Yeah. Well, fun while it lasted, Howard. I do want to make a case here for Brook Lopez, who I think is sort of getting his due, but it's not hard to make a case for him as the most important center in the East. You put him up there with Garnett and Chandler certainly this year, and depends on where you count Bosch. But Lopez has basically made the Nets better shooting at every single place on the floor when he's on the court. This is a team that can play decent defense, but is going to have to play basically to Lopez's style. Even when Lopez isn't in the game, they struggle to do things that kind of seem like more Darren Williams style basketball. And I have the feeling that it in reality, while people thought like, okay, this is going to be Darren Williams' team, he's the big market guy. What actually happened is they built a team that fits better around Brook Lopez.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like I think we saw when he went out how they just went right in the toilet. Like this guy is their most important player. I think it's pretty obvious at this point. And Darren's numbers were so bad, and they've rebounded kind of when PJ came back, but I think a lot of it is just to do with the fact that Lopez has been back and playing well and making the game easier on him. To throw it back to some of the Toronto stuff that I've been doing here, I didn't go to the Nets Raptors game because it was in Brooklyn, but I was at shoot around the day before, practice the day before, and somebody asked Casey how much of the resurgence has been because of Carlissimo, and he basically said they're running all the same stuff. They're playing mostly the same guys. They're just making more shots now and playing better. Somebody asked him how much of it is because Brook Lopez is back and playing well now, and he said, "Oh, that's huge." And that has a lot to do with how Darren's playing as well. And I think part of that is Casey's never ever going to bash Avery Johnson. He's not going to bash a coach that has been fired. And part of the reason they are better is probably because they changed coaches and the team really wasn't responding to him. But I think the main thing, the thing that really gets them going, is Brook Lopez. I think it's funny that we kind of forgot about him last year. And really, if you look at the stuff Devin Kerpershian was writing before the season, he was kind of banging that Brook Lopez drum. Like back before he got hurt, back before he had mono, he was awesome. And there's no reason to expect that he won't be that awesome and more because he's got more experience and and he's done things in this league, and I think he's surpassed any reasonable expectation that we could have had for him.
Yeah, he looks quicker. I want to address this point from Kevin Draper, which is that since the Avery firing, they've had a soft schedule and they pounded that soft schedule. I think that's true. I think Brook does especially well against weaker teams, but I also think that the Nets are just not going to. The Nets are always going to struggle to beat good teams, even when older players are playing well. Like a best case Nets scenario, like they won 50 games, that would be phenomenal. And if you just crush all the bad teams and split against the above average teams, you can win 50 games. That's kind of the ceiling we're talking about for them. So to take care of business is an improvement. Like Kevin points out, this doesn't make them contenders. It doesn't make them a team that's going to go to the Eastern Conference Finals, but it makes them a team that's going to win a lot. And I think we discount how much that is worth. So I have an interesting tidbit here. I can't share my source, but I was talking to a former NBA player, and we were talking about rotations, and I was asking, how, like, as a player, what do you think about a coach who has a strict rotation or a coach who has kind of a loosey goosey, you never know who's gonna play, whatever. And yeah, okay, we're gonna put this on. Brandon says humble brag. Kevin, thank you for correcting. That is not a humble brag. I'm very happy about this. He called myself big moment. Um, and he was saying, no one's ever going to be happy with a coach's rotation. Like some players are going to complain that they play too much. Some players are going to complain that they play too little. Sometimes that'll be the same player if it's Dwight Howard. It's tough. But what he said was, this guy isn't, someone like Doc Rivers, who is great at it and has this great feel and everyone trusts him, whatever. He's also not like Vinny Del Negro. And he gets, Vinny Del Negro will have his subs in, score 8 points, and then the other team will go on a 15-0 run before he makes a sub. And he was kind of implying that Del Negro has this bad rotations rep. And what it made me think of was that it's almost impossible for Del Negro to have bad rotations on the Clippers because they have like 9 really like solid to very good players. Like so it's Blake and Paul up top, but players 3 through 11, even 3 through 10, are like roughly interchangeable. Grant Hill, Matt Barnes, and Caron Butler are all like okay to pretty good players. And it's really hard to make like a devastating mistake, especially in the regular season, when you're like, did I play Grant Hill more than Matt Barnes too much? Like, is Lamar Odom getting too many minutes? Well, Lamar Odom's good now. Like, there's no bad players that they can play besides Willie Green, kind of. And I just wonder if, like, part of why Del Negro looks so good as a coach this year is because he can't mess that up. Like, there's just too many good players.
Yeah, I don't really see what he could do that would screw them up. I mean, he could start Curry off and play him like the entire game. Like it's really they have like solid guys at every position, and the Willie Green thing like bugs people. I mean, it bugged me that they were starting Willie Green for so long. But in all honesty, it wasn't hurting them. Like he did his thing. He shot his 3-pointers. He spaced the floor. He did his brand of like try hard defense that really wasn't like great defense, but he does the thing the coaches like.
First world problem.
Yeah, starting Willie Green on that team is a first world problem, and I think we should probably credit him for coaching that team and just kind of being like, hey, Chris, do your thing. You're the real coach of this team. Like you run the plays, you do whatever you want, especially late in games. I think we can credit him for that, but at the same time, it's like, what was he really going to do to screw this up? They have an awesome roster.
Right. Yeah, no, really, really good job with that. And also they've got, and he definitely deserves lots of credit for being able to relate to players. He's got everyone on the same page. These guys respond to him in the timeouts and kind of as a motivational thing, seem to get along with him fine. And he's deferring to his defensive coaches who have done a nice job installing some good stuff there. Right. So as Kevin points out, that if he's playing his two best players like 31 minutes a night, so it's really not, the amount of quarters where Chris Paul has just sat out there, not of games, Chris Paul has sat out the entire fourth quarter is like 12. I mean, he is really not taxing them, which is also great. I want to we gotta put this on screen too from Darius. Vinny is a notorious defensive coach. Not in that he coaches great defense, but that is he plays good defense as a coach. This was happening on Twitter briefly. I want to bring it into here and ask you what you think, James. So Danny Nowell was saying that Drummond and Monroe was the best big man pairing, young big man pairing in the NBA. Charlie Widows jumps in, of course, defending his Clippers, saying, nope, we got Blake and DeAndre, and they're not playing together enough. Could, though, Monroe and Drummond surpass Blake and DeAndre? And if so, next 2 years, next 3 years, what do you think?
I think they could. That's because I think really highly of Drummond's potential. I mean, from everything I know about that guy, the stuff about him not really wanting it, the stuff about him not really caring is all BS. He's really working hard there. Lawrence Frank seems to love him. The weird thing about everybody bashing Lawrence Frank for not playing him, which it's not like I think that's totally unfair. Like, I get it. I get that when a guy's that good, you want to see him playing, even if not 30 minutes a game. You want to see him playing like 26, 27 minutes a game. That's fair to me. But the funny thing about all that is that Lawrence Frank thinks the world of the kid, and he will talk him up to you if you ask him any questions about him. He loves his work ethic. He loves the fact that he seems to want to learn. The problem is he wants to kind of teach him through benching him and correcting his mistakes when he does make them, and there are plenty of mistakes if you look for them. The good does outweigh the bad, which is why people who just want to see him produce and want to see them do better, like, I'm sure they'd be a better team this year if they played him more, which is weird because normally with these coaches, they try to protect their jobs by trying to win now, but I think he's trying to protect his job by developing Drummond for the future and building good habits out of him. So I think if he keeps learning, he keeps getting better, and then he ends up increasing his minutes and decreasing his foul rate and being in the right spots all the time, I think we could be looking at two legit all-stars. I think Monroe essentially is already an all-star player. I mean, not defensively, but I think offensively he's an all-star type talent. He's just stuck in a crappy team, so he's definitely not going to be an all-star this year, probably won't next year. But I think 2 years down the line, you could be looking at two all-stars in that front court, and you might be looking at that in LA as well. But in my opinion, I think Drummond's ceiling is a little bit higher than DeAndre's. I love DeAndre, but I just think Drummond is this like crazy special talent.
Right, and the likelihood that those two though will get to play with Chris Paul is a little bit lower.
Yeah.
No, I think Drummond will be a better player than Jordan. I wonder. It sounds like when we think of those two, Monroe is almost 7 feet. Like he is a forward / center. He's not necessarily like although he can shoot it a little bit, he's not like a Dirk stretch four. And I think they would be more of like a Powell and like a Powell in his prime plus Dwight is what you would think about with those two more than like almost like a Twin Towers thing, more than perhaps Blake and DeAndre, where you have more of a open court picking and rolling type game. I think they would be very distinct because Monroe is much more like LaMarcus Aldridge, for instance, than he is like Blake Griffin. So Darius brought this up in the chat there, and we got to talk about Earl Clark because so the Lakers are like a really funny team to watch because they have so many really slow players that when Earl Clark does something, it like pops off the screen because he's so much more athletic and active than their typical players. I mean, like when Jameson is out there, for instance. And I'm down with Earl. I like him. I think he's, especially with a guy like Nash who can who always will make that type of player better. I think that's like, he could do some solid things for them. And He looks like at least a slight upgrade from Jordan Hill. He's not going to foul as much. I like him. He's got a little more skill. So hopefully, who knew that the Lakers season could be turning on giving Earl Clark some big minutes? Finally.
I like Earl Clark. I think I always liked him. He was it him? I think it was him. There was, when he was in Orlando, one blogger was like, who is your team's Earl Clark? And they asked all the bloggers that had team sites to name their guy that played like not enough minutes on their bench that they loved because every little dose of them they thought was wonderful. Yeah, free Earl Clark. This is exactly what I think teams have wanted from him at every stop, as they wanted to see him get the minutes. And it's fun right now. I just hope that as like once he is freed, people don't turn on him for not being as great as they kind of expected after building him up.
He's like they free the dove into the wild, and then there's like a hunter on the other side, just like ready to go.
Just like that.
Like that. So kind of under the radar today, and this will be our last topic. Henry Abbott released something on True Hoop today, just sort of a news item about PEDs and HGH testing, and we're to the point now where the scientific community is like, it's like one of these, it's like global warming. Like everyone is on board that this is happening. HGH can be tested for effectively. The false positives are, quote, as likely as someone getting struck by lightning. And in the NBA CBA, there is a provision that if that test for HGH becomes applicable, I don't know if that's the right word, but if it becomes legit, I sound like such a dumbass now, then they will put it in and they will start using it. Now, I've talked to a lot of NBA people, like fans, not people, who think that
Fans are not people.
no, fans are not people. There's some lower, and then they get the Twitter fan. Anyway, we'll do the whole hierarchy some other time. But they that like basically they don't care if players in the NBA are juicing. Would you agree with that? I mean, do you not want to know, or is not wanting to know the same as not caring?
I think they're different things. I think not wanting to know is more like you're paranoid and you're afraid that like you're now going to hate all of your favorite players because they're juicing. Not caring is just, well, whatever. It's not a big. You either think not a lot of people are doing it, or you think that it wouldn't really bother you because this is like there's the argument like what's the difference between that and just training really hard and taking supplements and stuff. Like personally, this isn't like a huge issue of mine. I'm not like crusading on this. I think it'll be interesting when we get Ethan to talk about this because it seems like his thing that he believes that everybody is juicing. From what I understand, like, but I'm no expert.
Those words in his mouth, but go on.
That's okay. That's an exaggeration, but this is what he gets for him missing the show today. From in my estimation, I doubt it's a huge issue. Like, I doubt that there's that significant a population of players that are using it, but I'll be open to finding out whatever research comes out or whatever. It's hard though. I'm not a huge expert on the PEDs thing. To me, I'm not in the like don't tell me I don't want to know camp. I would more be in the I'm in the meh camp about PEDs in the NBA probably.
No, I think that's the like that apathy of lack of information is common, right? That like there's no story there, so I'm not going to get fired up about the potential. The reason that I think that it's a really important issue is that obviously PEDs help you play basketball better. Like I don't think that this is an arguable fact at this point. They make you stronger, they help you recover faster, which is the big thing in the NBA, which is a competitive advantage. And the reason that it's important is that if people are using something, I want everyone to know, like everyone who wants to be able to do so legally. So if we're gonna set the bar at, okay, you can use HGH, it'll help you heal faster, it'll make you somewhat better, athlete, and we want that in the NBA, so we're okay with it. I'm fine with that as well, if it turns out that it's safe and whatever. But I'm not fine with someone having a choice between keeping up and falling behind because they obey the rules. So if the rules are going to be this way, then there should be testing and they should enforce it, just because, these are like, this is like a grown man's livelihood we're talking about.
No, I agree with you totally. And it's just like with other sports, I think that's very like we've learned our lessons from other sports about that, where you'll have all these guys who feel like they have no choice but to do it to keep up. My only thing is, it's just it hasn't been shown to me that that's the culture of basketball. Like in being around like basketball players and stuff, I don't know that it's really an issue. Like I don't know. Like if you talk to all the trainers in the NBA, I'm not sure if any of them, even off the record, would have a story for you. Whereas if you talk to baseball trainers or whatever, all of them would. But it's like this hasn't been explored in enough detail yet. And
baseball trainers wouldn't, right? And then people started using, and then people started not being caught, and then it became a thing that people felt they had to do. And at that point, it caught up. Where like, so if the NBA, which would be great, is at this point where it hasn't happened yet, then that like people aren't occasionally using it or using it in
I'm sure people have occasionally used it. I'm just saying I don't know if it's like embedded in the culture to that point yet.
Right. No, but I'm saying if that's the case, that's good. Let's get testing in there so that people will so that it'll be okay, this is a clear line, and then it won't enter the culture. Once you permit it, then it becomes a scandal, and then like if you found out, star player X had been on HEH and won 2 championships, you'd be like, oh, well, what the hell? Like this is a problem now.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
No harm can be done by testing. I'm all for the testing. That's good. To be clear.
Yeah, I'm gonna pin you down on this, James. All right, man. Well, thanks for co-hosting here. This was fun despite our technical difficulties with Howard and my managed to insult everyone who's watching, except for you, Darius. What's up, bud? I'll catch you guys later. We'll be back on Tuesday. Thanks a lot, James.
Thank you. Howard says that he would love to try this again soon, so we'll try to make that happen.
Yeah, we'll see about that. Roger Bain, take us out.
I taught my bird to whistle like a referee. I can make a free throw when I'm down on one knee. I've been a fan of basketball since I was 5. Now I am a fan of HoopSpeak Live. Hilarious analysis, a mystifying trope. An angel with a cudgel breaking bubbles of soap. Like honeybees buzzing around a hive. Everybody buzzing about HoopSpeak Live.